Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's the big number. I'm Tom Haberstroh, and that's my man, Dan Devine. We do this every week on Yahoo Sports, and we're finally here. Finals are over. The Oklahoma City Thunder have been crowned as champions. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing great. I mean, I'm feeling very flowy. It's an extremely warm day here in Brooklyn, New York City, and but we have a champion. We are moving into an off season. The draft is in like 5 minutes. Free agency is about 5 minutes after that. I'm my third eye's open. I'm expanding, thinking about Eurobasket. There's a lot happening. But right now, Tom Haberstroh, I'm ready to put up some numbers. So hit me with it. We're past the finals now. So what could possibly be the big number for this week?
Yeah, we're looking forward this week. This week's big number is plus 240. That is the odds of the Oklahoma City Thunder, according to BetMGM. The odds of OKC winning next year's championship. We're already turning the page, Dan. It's old news. Sunday might as well have been like 8 months ago. Okay, we're now flipping the page to next year, and we're looking at the BetMGM odds here. Thunder are plus 240, and the Cavs are at plus 800, the Rockets at plus 800, Knicks plus 900, and Magic, Lakers, and Wolves are tied at plus 1,400 to win the title next year. And I gotta say, I can go both ways on this. I'm a little surprised that the odds aren't shorter for OKC, considering we saw Tyrese Haliburton go down with the torn Achilles. Jason Tatum, of course, in Boston. We'll talk about the Jrue Holiday trade later in the program. And then you got Damian Lillard, and Giannis is looking around like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, in that empty room, just be like, who's on my team? The Thunder are at plus 240, which is an implied probability of 29%. They are not the odds-on favorite, Dan, which would mean that they were 50% or more likely to win the title. So just first blush here, looking at OKC, how do you feel about the plus 240, which would be, if it holds, the heaviest preseason favorite for a non-KD, non-Steph, non-LeBron team since the 2010 Lakers? So yes, they are a heavy favorite, but also still just a 29% implied odds of winning it all next year.
Yeah, so like if it's OKC versus the field is the heavy favorite. But then if you look at the sub-segmented out, the slices are a lot thinner of that pie. In Oklahoma City, more than a quarter of it. I think it accurately represents the position the Thunder find themselves in heading out of that finals. Obviously, dominant regular season, got sent the distance in 2 series against Denver and against Indiana, but the defense not only held, was even more elite in the postseason in terms of the way they generated turnovers and the way they got stops and the way they would just strangle opposing teams' offenses. They come out of it healthy, which obviously, that's not the case for a lot of these teams, as you mentioned, with Tyrese Haliburton and Jason Tatum and Damian Lillard and the chaos in the East. They come out of it with, I think, pretty much the entirety of their rotation still under contract, still the arrow ticking up on them. They're going to be able to integrate in Nikola Topic, their their lottery pick from the 2024 NBA draft, who many projected as being like a top 5 caliber talent before he got injured, and then Thunder able to scoop him up. I saw him, I was doing the shoot arounds in the practice sessions there. Like he's working in on all that stuff with Oklahoma City. They're really high on him moving forward. Man.
It's unfair.
Yeah. It's crazy. And then, the pick, they're going to another, middle of the first round pick, they're going to be able to add this year and so on and so forth. So like, it doesn't seem like they're on the path to losing anything dramatic from this season. They have the MVP of the league still on the upper trajectory. They have an all NBA player in Jalen Williams on the upper trajectory, and multiple all defensive caliber players. Chet Holmgren, the arrow still ticking up. Alex Caruso, you can manage his minutes. Lou Dort, the whole gang is sort of everybody. The arrow is going up. So I think you're right to say, like, if there's a surprise here, it's that it's not a bigger, favorite at this point. But I think that also might reflect just what we've seen in terms of how quickly it can all kind of turn around. Because we said, we were saying similar things for Denver after they won the title. And it's like they're bringing back that whole starting 5, how young Jokic and Murray are. They're going to be, on the rampage for years. And the Celtics, obviously, we said, this is the start of something rather than the end of something. Things can change awfully quickly. And certainly we're all crossing our fingers that nothing like that happens for Oklahoma City. But I think it seems like the hedge there is just like, you can't say that they're like the odds-on favorite given how dramatically one thing can change everything.
Yeah, I mean, the youth on this team, I wrote about it this week in the aftermath of the championship. I mean, I don't know how teams can watch the NBA Finals and see how they outlasted the Indiana Pacers, beat them at their own game playing speedball. They beat Denver with a totally different style of play, Minnesota, different style of play. And they kind of are this team that can wear a bunch of different hats and still beat you at whatever game you want to play. If you want to go big, they can go big with Isaiah Hartenstein, Jalen Williams, and Chet Holmgren. If you go small, they can go Jalen Williams at the 5, and they don't really miss much of a beat. And they've got all of these amazing defenders. And hey, let's take a victory lap on that. Like the second episode of The Big Number this year, we were just campaigning on how good this defense was. The OKC Dobermans that were just like dogs out there, vicious, ferocious, and the way that they totally upended the Tyrese Halliburton, Pascal Siakam, the attack that they had in Game 7. Things kind of, when Tyrese Halliburton, when he got hurt, things completely changed, and it was because of that crazy defense. TJ McConnell having a career high 7 turnovers, and I felt bad for him because it's just like, he's looking around being like, I need some help. But his guy, Hallie, was in the locker room dealing with a devastating injury at the most devastating time. So it was a thing that I think because of Tyrese Halliburton's injury, it dampens what they did in winning this championship, but it doesn't take away from the fact that they won the NBA championship. They were 16-7 in the postseason. Their defense was about 7 points better than league average, which is up there with the best defenses we've seen in NBA history in the postseason for any champion. And they got room to get better, right, Dan? So Chet Holmgren, he's 23. You got Lou Dort, who's 26. You have J-Dub, who's 24. Topic is 19, okay? So I could see a scenario in which the Oklahoma City Thunder are the best point differential team in NBA history. They just outscored opponents by 1,247 points, postseason included. That's a huge number. The biggest number we've seen in that category for any team. They won 68 games in the regular season, another 16. There's only 2 other teams that won more games. They won 84 games. There's only 2 teams that won more games in the entirety of the season. So, like, if you want to say they're the odds-on favorite going into next season, giving all of the horrendous injuries in the Eastern Conference, I can't disagree with you. Like, I can't look at this Thunder team and honestly say that there's a team nipping at their heels next year. Because the only team, and we'll get into this, that I feel like is right there with every other team in that kind of second tier, the Houston Rockets, they were a first round out this year.
Yeah.
So they'd have to win not just 1 more series, not just 2 more series, but 3 more series to upend the Golden State Warriors and win the championship next year. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to get into, Dan, our 4 favorites to win the title if it's not OKC. And it's early. We've got the draft coming up on Tuesday night or on Wednesday night. We've got another round of free agency where more deals can happen. But I just want to look at next year and kind of peg an early plant an early flag on some of these teams to get people their bearings heading into this offseason. Because OKC, man, they're so fast. They're so young. And I wouldn't be surprised if they won 70 games next year. They lost Chet for half the season and
That's
they won
what I was
68.
Gonna say. Yeah, I mean, Chet played 32 games during the regular season. Isaiah Hartenstein played 57 games. Caruso played 54. So, like, there is a possibility that some regression or, I guess, progression in terms of their injury luck puts them in an even higher tax bracket. So that's it's a wild thing to consider, but that's the bar. And then all these other teams are looking to clear it. And yeah, we'll get into, how some teams maybe are trying to do that and what the likelihood is that they're going to be able to clear it.
Yeah. And just real quick on OKC, I wouldn't be surprised if they got like a top 6 pick in this draft.
Now remind me how?
They got Topic. They've got the 15, the 24, and the 44. And if you flaunt that to a team that is looking to add more depth and they don't love the top 5 or top 6, They can move up from 15. They can move up even closer if they put Topic on the table. They can move into the top 10 theoretically without giving up a single player who played in the NBA Finals. You know, like
it's nuts.
Think about that. And there's reports from the Steinline, Jake Fisher and the Steinline are also reporting that there were talks between Phoenix and OKC at the 10 spot, like exploratory talks before, Houston, exploratory talks with Houston, who originally owned the pick before they sent it to Phoenix in the Kevin Durant trade. And so the fact that like OKC was kicking the tires on the number 10 pick, I think we need to be realistic here and understand that Oklahoma City Thunder can package like 2 first-round picks, future first-round picks. They're 15, they're 24, they're 44, and Topic. And I think teams would listen. I think a lot of teams would listen and be like, okay, I mean, we get what was last year one of the top picks in Topic before he tore his ACL, and we get like 3 more first-round picks. I think teams are going to listen. So watch out for OKC making a big move on draft night. So moving aside from the Thunder and a championship, well-deserved, well-earned, no asterisks on it, I think the Thunder should very much enjoy this championship parade that is happening as we speak. And coming up after the break, Dan, we're going to talk about our 4 favorites. One by one, we'll go through them. Our 4 favorite non-OKC teams to win the championship next year. As of now, the Thunder are at plus 240, a 29% chance to win it all. Do we see anyone take them down? Stay tuned. All right, Dan, this week's big number, plus 240. Those are the odds, according to BetMGM, for the Thunder to win the championship next year. And there's some others that are kind of in this like second tier. We're going to talk about Jrue Holiday and the Anthony Simons trade later in the show. But first, what is your first little number with your favorite team, if it's not OKC, to win it all next year?
First little number this week is 0.84. That's how many points per possession the Houston Rockets scored in isolation last season, according to our friends at Synergy Sports. Only 4 teams were less productive than that when they finished plays going one-on-one. That was the Atlanta Hawks, New Orleans Pelicans, Washington Wizards, and Toronto Raptors, which is not the neighborhood you want to be in if you're talking about generating elite offense. So how do you solve that kind of problem when you're like, we're not really good at one-on-one scoring and we're a playoff team, and when you get to the postseason, you're going to need to create one-on-one. How about you go get Kevin Durant, who was literally the most efficient isolation scorer in the entire NBA last season, among guys who finished at least 75 ISOs, and has been, at or around that era, that region of eliteness in isolation scoring for, 12 years, 13 years, something like that. So the Rockets last season, they were just outside the top 10 in offensive efficiency outside of garbage time, according to Cleaning the Glass. But a lot of that is offensive rebounding. It's the way their defense generates transition opportunities. They were 22nd in half-court scoring. And what do you do when all that dries up? The answer now is you give it to Kevin Durant. So, Tom, I'm interested to hear what you think about how adding Kevin Durant at the cost of Jalen Green, who, there's a lot to like about Jalen Green, but also he had the worst on-court, off-court differential of any player on the Rockets rotation last year. And Dylan Brooks, who important defensive player, but they also got Amen Thompson and Tari Eason to guard on the wing. The 10th pick in this week's draft and 5 future second rounders. Where does that put Houston in the pecking order here as you look forward to next season?
Yeah, this trade for KD was a highway robbery. I mean, they basically gave up Jalen Green, who was 23 years old, didn't match what they needed in the half court. Again, like you said, their half court offense, when they weren't getting out in transition, Amen Thompson wasn't doing the Kawhi flubber, the flubber Kawhi stuff that we called it earlier this year. When they didn't have that, things got bogged down, and now they got Kevin Durant, who's as efficient of a scorer, who can shoot over the top of the defense at any point. You give him the ball, and he's going to be a really high-quality look. They got Kevin Durant for basically like a young, unpolished player in Jalen Green and a stud 3-and-D guy, but they also have a lot of those defenders.
Yeah.
A lot of defenders that remind me of OKC and their slew of defenders, elite defenders in Tari Eason and Amen Thompson. So I really feel like they took a surplus, right? They've got an elite fleet of defenders, and they gave one of those guys up. So the opportunity cost isn't huge for them. And they didn't give up a future first round pick. The number 10 pick, we saw that Reed Shepherd was buried on that bench this season.
Right.
Houston, I think, looks at this and says, I think we just added a whole bunch of stuff without really subtracting much at all. Dylan Brooks is a much better three-point shooter than Amen Thompson and Tari Eason have shown up until this point, but they're young and they can develop into that. And I do think when you have Kevin Durant on your team, that actually makes a lot more open shots and a lot of better off-ball cuts. He's more willing passer than Jalen Green is. And I think this is an outstanding move for the Houston Rockets, where it's like, I don't think that they are on the same tier as OKC, but I love them as the second best team in the NBA next season. They were a first round out to the Golden State Warriors. A lot of that, I think, can be owed to Jalen Green, a guy that had 38 points in one game and then averaged 9 in the other games. That's not what you need. That kind of inconsistency of a 23-year-old is not what Houston needs. And so they need someone kind of a metronome, someone to stabilize the offense. Fred VanVleet was that at times, but they just got one of the best ones ever to pick up a basketball. So, Dan, in the postseason, they scored 92 points every 100 plays in the half court, which was the 12th ranked among playoff teams. So there's 16 teams in the playoffs. So when you're trying to win a championship and you have a 12th ranked out of 16 in half court offense, not great. Not great, Bob. So I'm taking OKC next year, hand over fist, like making sure that I don't lend you to think that I think Houston's on the same tier, but I have them better than any East team coming out of next year, and I have them better than any West team. I think they're going to be that number 2 seed again next year. And one thing I do love, Dan, I think that they can ease Kevin Durant's minutes with Jabari Smith, with Amen Thompson, Alpi Şengün. I think even Reed Shepherd is going to be able to float that offense a lot more than what you saw in Phoenix, where it was like, if they didn't have Devin Booker on the floor, KD just had to do so much for them. And so I think this team is going to be really good next year. And plus 800 from BetMGM, that feels a little long to me. I would say they're closer to plus 600, especially if they can guarantee that Kevin Durant will be healthy next year. I know that's a big if, but sure. I like the Houston Rockets next year.
Yeah, a ton to like about a 50-win team that their biggest problem was scoring efficiently in the half court, adding one of the greatest half court scorers in the history of the game. So pretty good deal there. On to our second little number, 81.7%. That was the Cleveland Cavaliers winning percentage last season against teams that were not the Indiana Pacers. The Cavs went 64-18 during the regular season and 5-4 in the playoffs. So 69-22 overall. They went 2-7 against the Indiana Pacers, 1-3 in the regular season. And then, as you might remember, 1-4 in the second round of the postseason, a series marked by Tyrese Halliburton's incredible game-winning three-pointer, the step back after the offensive rebound on the missed free throw, and also injuries to Darius Garland and Evan Mobley and DeAndre Hunter, and then even eventually to Donovan Mitchell. Well, Tyrese Halliburton's likely to miss all next season. And so, as you mentioned earlier, are Jason Tatum and Damian Lillard. And the Knicks fired their head coach and don't have one anymore. And so the Cavs are looking around at the chaos in the Eastern Conference, and they are positioned to bring back 8 of their top 10. They still, TBD on Ty Jerome and Sam Merrill. They're unrestricted free agents. We'll see. They were the East's number 1 seed. They look like they've got a pretty clear pathway in front of them now. And like maybe a few weeks ago, we thought they had to do some dramatic restructuring. And then the way that the last few weeks have worked out has worked out. And so I think you mentioned earlier the odds at this point, plus 800. I believe that's the best of any team in the East. What do we make of the Cavs in this dramatically reshaped landscape as a potential team to make a leap here?
I mean, if something happens to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander next year, maybe they have a shot. Like, it just feels like they're going to need something to go their way because that backcourt just can't defend at the level that I think they need to win the NBA championship. That was very clear.
We should say Darius Garland is probably going to miss the start of the season as he's recovering from toe surgery. So we'll see when he gets back, in what state he does, what the beginning of the season looks like for Cleveland, etc.
Exactly. So they're not going to get off on the right foot anyway to start next season. I think I think when you look at this roster, it seems like it has a lot of upside with Evan Mobley still entering his prime and Darius Garland, same thing. Donovan Mitchell in his prime. You would think that this is a young up and coming team that should be able to contend with OKC, but they just need more two-way players. Like Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland can score with the best of them when healthy, but they have to get some more, I guess, dogs out there. They need some guys, point of attack defenders that can help them get across the finish line. And they also need their health. This is the second year in a row that in the postseason, yeah, they came up short, but a lot of it was because of injuries, right? Like of all the teams in the postseason that can look at, all right, well, we didn't have our guys healthy in this season, and they didn't have catastrophic, devastating injuries like a lot of their East counterparts. I do think you can look at the Cavs and say, all right, if they are healthy and they don't have Darius Garland hurt and they don't have Jared Allen hurt, which he was 2 years ago, and if they don't have Donovan Mitchell hurt, then we can reevaluate. I can see them holding this team together and saying, we want one more shot with this crew. If they're healthy and they still come up short, then maybe we consider some wholesale changes. But I wouldn't be surprised, Dan, if they decide to move Darius Garland and to try to get some help defensively at the point of attack and try to kind of ease some of that offensive upside, the best offense in the regular season, and maybe try to figure out how to balance this roster a little bit more, Dan. I don't know what the trade is exactly, but like, would it be crazy if the Miami Heat and the Cleveland Cavaliers, I feel like a guy like Davion Mitchell to get the Donovan and Davion matchup together in the backcourt, something to help them ease how one-sided that backcourt is. Because as you saw with Nembhard and with Nesmith and with all the guys on OKC, you have to have two-way guys that can hit shots, move the ball, and defend at a high level. And I just don't know if Cleveland has that right now. But that's why they're at plus 800 and not higher with all the injuries in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I think that's, we've shouted him out multiple times on this show, but Owen Phillips at the newsletter, the F5, that idea of the weak link era of the NBA and the notion of, is it worth more to sort of accentuate your highest strength or like try to mitigate your weakest points, especially on the defensive end? You need somebody, you need a roster where you can't pick on anybody. And Darius Garland has been under the microscope there before in the postseason.
I'm with you. Cleveland is number 2 on my list. So I got Houston, Cleveland, and I think we're going to differ here on number 3. So what do you got as your number 3 most likely to win if it isn't the Oklahoma City Thunder?
Our third little number this week is 27 and 8. So I guess that's 2 little numbers technically, but we're incorrigible. So we're going to shove that in there. 27 and 8 was the Warriors' record, regular season and playoffs combined, when Stephen Curry and Jimmy Butler played together.
Yes.
And I think we forget a little bit. 27 and 8 is a 771 winning percentage, which works out to a 63 win clip over an 82 game sample. Pretty good. We've talked about it a ton on this show since the Jimmy trade over the course of the second half of the season into the postseason. The Jimmy trade like fundamentally transformed who the Warriors were in the middle of the season, took them from a 10 seed to like a near 50 win team that made the play-in, that advanced out of the play-in, that won a playoff series, and that was looking really good in the beginning of that series against the Minnesota Timberwolves until Steph Curry pulled up lame with the hamstring ailment that kept him out for the rest of the series and submarined their chances. But now you look at this, they have the proof of concept of what the team looks like after you add Jimmy Butler to Stephen Curry and Draymond Green. You've got a full offseason to sort of, for Steve Kerr and that staff to orient what that needs to look like. You've got a handful of semi-interesting-ish young guys around them with Brandon Pajemski and Moses Moody, Quentin Post, Guy Santos, Trace Jackson Davis, like guys that all kind of add a little bit of sprinkle of spice here and there in, on one side of the ball or both sides of the ball to that crew. Got a lot of flexibility under the aprons. You can maybe use the full tax with a full middle-level exception, biannual exception there to add some talent. There's the big question of like Jonathan Kuminga's restricted free agency. Is he a sign and trade chip? Do you bring him back? How do you evolve? The point generally being like we have evidence that this is really good, and they're going off like the last I saw was like plus 2,500. And so I'm
plus 2,500. Yeah, they're like the 12th most likely team to win the championship next year. I think that's crazy. I think that's crazy. They're
Right?
number 3 on my list too, dude.
Yeah,
Like
oh, okay,
I love
cool.
Golden State
Right.
at this value. Like you're not being out of left field here. I'm right there with you. So it goes Thunder, Cavs, Rockets. This is according to BetMGM. Rockets, Knicks, and then there's a 3-way tie with the Magic, Lakers, and the Wolves at plus 1,400. The Nuggets at plus 1,600. The Celtics, after the Jrue trade,
Right.
plus 1,700. And then you get to the Warriors at plus 2,500. So, like, this is a team that was just in the Western Conference Finals, beat the Houston Rockets, and who knows what happens with the Jonathan Kuminga trade? You said it. Like, they have a 60-win pace with those big 3 on the floor for them in uniform. This is a team that I feel like has a very high ceiling and a very low floor. Like
Right.
a lot can go wrong for the Warriors at that age when your core is made up of guys who are 35, 36, 37 years old and have had multiple runs to the NBA Finals. A lot of not much tread left on those tires. But if Kuminga either A, develops into the piece that they need, that they can trust him to play within the offense and be that athleticism that they so need on the team, or some other team sees that, if it's New Orleans, if it's Miami, if it's Brooklyn, if it's Toronto, like all these teams that are looking for a kind of a star player to build around, a young star. I think these odds are crazy. The Warriors at plus 2,500. I just feel like with this team and the way that like think about it, if you're New Orleans and you've got a new front office in place with Joe Dumars, and they're looking at this and saying, we want a fresh start here. I could see like the Warriors being like, all right, we need some athleticism, some guys to go downhill. Kuminga, Zion Williamson, figure out some way to trade for Zion, or hey, let's get Herb Jones and get him in here. And they say, all right, we need some defense. We need some guys who can play 3-and-D for them. I just feel like there's a lot of interesting pieces that Kuminga could be traded for. I don't know how I feel about Vooch. I'm still like, I said at the deadline last year, wouldn't be surprised if like Vooch and Chicago traded for Kuminga. Maybe that's the deal. I would be stunned if Kobe White is in a deal for Jonathan Kuminga, but maybe Chicago. They traded Alex Caruso to the now champs Oklahoma City Thunder without getting a pick for Josh Giddey. Maybe that happens, but I just think that the Golden State Warriors, they're kind of a sleeping giant here in the Western Conference. I think if Steph Curry doesn't have to have that quick turnaround after Game 7 of Houston, he doesn't hurt his hamstring. I'm not saying they win that series. I'm just saying I think people would be thinking a lot differently about the Warriors' chances going into next year if we didn't see them play, 3 games in 5 nights.
Totally. The last impression we have of the Warriors is that the final 4 games of their season came without Stephen Curry, and the entire team is built around what it is with Stephen Curry on the floor. So like we have our most recent impression of them is, I think, dramatically below what they looked like when they were all on the court together. And I do understand the general feeling of like this entire thing is built around 3 guys on the wrong side of 35. And so I understand like exercise caution in terms of where the odds are. That might be a bit too much caution for what this iteration of the team looks like, especially if Mike Dunleavy Jr. and that front office are able to add some more talent around, use that Kuminga chip or, whatever other options are available to them to buttress around it. Because like the Jimmy trade showed, we're going for it. Like this is there's one timeline. It's the one sacred timeline now, and this is it. So, do what you can to maximize it. For the 4th and final little number this week, I want to go back to a team you just mentioned. Our 4th and final little number is 250. That's how many games the Knicks won, regular season and playoffs combined, since Tom Thibodeau took over in 2020. 250 wins, nice round number. The only coaches with more wins in that span, Steve Kerr of the Warriors, as we just mentioned, and Michael Malone of the Denver Nuggets, who shares something in common with Tom Thibodeau, which is that neither one of them are coaching the team that they led to all those wins anymore. Tom Thibodeau, as you might remember, got shown the door by the Knicks after bowing out in the Eastern Conference Finals to the Indiana Pacers. 3 weeks later, the Knicks still do not have a head coach, although, judging by the reporting of all the guys they tried to get permission to interview, it's not through lack of trying. including most recent word I saw Tuesday morning was that they've interviewed Micah Nori, the well-regarded assistant from the Minnesota Timberwolves, who was the head of the offense while Karl Anthony Towns was there, which is kind of interesting. Here's the thing, though. They don't have a coach. They do have Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, Mitchell Robinson, and Deuce McBride all under contract. So like a legit top 7 of a Eastern Conference finalist rotation. They'll probably be a pretty attractive destination for vitamin minimum. Nope.
Vitamin mini.
Vitavita Vegemin. They'll probably be an attractive destination for veteran minimum free agents because, you know, it's New York and you've got a team that's probably ready to make a big playoff run again. They stand to benefit from all that injury chaos atop the East too. So like, how do you handicap the team looks like a Final Four contender and they don't have a coach? Like, how do you, where do you put them at this point? I think that's pretty interesting.
It is. And we don't have Jason Kidd an extension out of Dallas yet. So
interesting.
Like, I don't think we've closed the door on the whole weird flirting between the courtship between the two and Jason Kidd and New York. And like, yes, Dallas denied that permission to interview and bring in Jason Kidd. But like, until that ink goes to paper on an extension, I just think that like, I'm not willing to close the door on Jason Kidd coaching the New York Knicks next year. So the Knicks are at plus 900. They're the fourth shortest odds to win the championship next year. The Magic are tied for 5th at plus 1400, along with the Lakers and Wolves. Magic are interesting. They do kind of play this bully ball, and they did get one of the best 3-and-D guys in the league in Desmond Bane, a guy who's one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA in Desmond Bane, also getting hopefully a healthy Jalen Suggs back. And I think they still have a couple moves up their sleeves this offseason. I wouldn't count them out. I just feel like the Knicks are a little bit above them on the pecking order. I agree with this kind of slotting them, the Knicks, even without a head coach. Maybe there's a plan here.
It just feels nuts, but I mean, it's wild. It's really, really wild.
And then what happens with Rick Brunson? You know, it's super awkward because whoever's going to be hired for the Knicks job is probably going to have to hire onto his bench Rick Brunson, Jalen Brunson's father. And it's an awkward fit. Maybe that's one of the reasons why we haven't seen the New York Knicks hire a head coach after stunning everybody by firing Tom Thibodeau just hours after their playoff run to the Eastern Conference Finals. You could talk me into the Knicks being undervalued here and also overrated here at plus 900. The team I'm looking at, I know this seems kind of mainstream here. I think the Lakers are really interesting next year, Dan.
Okay, see, they were almost the fourth little number for me because I am also. Tell me why. I'm with you, I think, but I want to hear your argument.
Skinny Luka, like if Luka's in shape, we're getting lots of rumblings and reports that he's actually gonna get in shape this time. He seems committed to the Lakers with that tweet once they were sold to Mark Walter, and he was saying like, I want to win multiple championships. I just feel like their ability to get a healthy Luka back, LeBron is, you know, he's still playing at a high level, but I also think that the Dallas Mavericks signing an extension with Daniel Gafford for under the amount, according to the Steinline, again, just great reporting here, that the extension for Daniel Gafford that they just agreed to is actually a little bit below what it would mean that they would have a trade restriction attached to Daniel Gafford.
Yes,
that seems to me on purpose, is that they have some optionality with Daniel Gafford. And wouldn't it be just poetic if they traded Daniel Gafford? Like, yep, you know what? Take Daniel Gafford too. Like, I'll trade Luka Doncic in last year, and then a couple months later, we'll trade you Daniel Gafford. Or Kristaps Porzingis is also a guy that I'm looking at for the Lakers. It feels like if they get either of those two guys on the Lakers, where they had a huge hole at the center position in Jackson Hayes, and they basically, JJ Redick was like, I'm going small for 48 minutes because I don't have anybody else to play at the 5. But if they get KP or Daniel Gafford, or for that matter, Derek Lively, I think is more likely to be traded now than he was yesterday, given that Daniel Gafford is signed to an extension. I could see Dallas Mavericks moving either of those two guys over to the Lakers. So Dan, like Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively, like I feel like one of those guys could be moved from the Dallas Mavericks now, this week even. And Austin Reeves, we'll see if he's a Laker next year, but I think that deal for both sides could be interesting. Why did they do that deal before? I don't know, but I feel like the Lakers are kind of underrated here with a motivated, skinny Luka potentially going into next year. I like the Lakers odds in a very high ceiling. It's the Western Conference, so it seems crazy to go with the fourth slot here going with the Lakers, but I just feel like, man, the Lakers have some upside here.
Yeah, I mean, the argument would be it's essentially like after the first finals run for the Heat, right? Where it's like you give them an off season to retrofit the roster a little more, add one or two pieces that that better balance the roster, that round out the rotation, and then that second version of the team is going to look a heck of a lot better than the first version. And obviously, in the Miami situation, that leads to you bring in Shane Battier and Mike Miller, and then like that team kind of is off to the races and the style of play. But in this case, getting Luka a center, I think is the idea of it being either Gafford or Gafford Lively or Kristaps, like the ghosts of Luka past, right? The partnerships past. Like
I forgot about the KP thing. Yeah,
it's either your pop big to have you 5 out, or your roll big to be able to get those lobs off. And like I think we've seen the roll big has been the better benefit for Luka in terms of getting his game off. And although when they had KP under Rick Carlisle, that was like the most efficient offense in NBA history to that point. So with multiple ways to skin a cat and, get great offense out of it. But yeah, like looking at it and saying, you bring back Luka alongside LeBron with the sort of switchable wings they've got around there. They can play those sort of smaller five out lineups. There was a lot of value in that. The Lakers, also because of the like staggered like LeBron injury and Luka didn't play the first few games they got there, they didn't get like a full runway for what that could look like toward the end of the season. I get where you're coming from. It does feel really heavily dependent though on, do you nail that center move? Where does the complementary ball handling come from if Reeves goes out? And then, like Dorian Finney-Smith is going to be, they're going to have to figure out what they do with it in terms of extending him or moving on from him. Like there's stuff to figure out. But you do have the starting point of Luka, LeBron, Reeves as a piece to move around. There's a lot to like there. But yeah, that's talking through this. It's so wild to think like, yeah, we're hours relatively removed from the Thunder winning the NBA championship. We are broadcasting in the middle of their parade, and the entire rest of the league is just like loading up to figure out how to knock them off the top of the mountain. Yeah, it doesn't stop. It just does not stop. And, who knows what kind of conversations we'll be having about what these rosters look like in a couple of days once we're on the draft, in a week and a half when free agency is going. Like, yeah, everything is going to look a lot different before we get a sense of what the lay of the land looks like come September.
I think the Thunder win it next year. I think they do.
We haven't had a repeat champion in what? This would be the 8th year. So I mean, it's bucking a trend. We've moved toward parity in Adam Silver's NBA, but man, if anybody's positioned to do it, it does feel like this Thunder team. Although we've said that before, and look where it's landed us.
Yeah. This is the youngest champion in 50 years. The best defense by a mile in the NBA, and then I feel like Chet Holmgren could be the second best player on this team next year with his development on the offensive end, just his first full season, and not really a full season. Like, I guess if you combine the postseason, he played about 50 games this year, but I just think, man, they've got so much more room for improvement. Like, I think we're at the doorstep of a dynasty with this team. So I think it is okay.
Unless the Knicks ask the Pacers for permission to interview Rick Carlisle, and then we get the whole musical chairs moving around, and we see if you can't beat him, get him to join. Maybe that's the idea.
Well, Rick C, we did the Jay-Z Big Pimpin' right. remix. Rick C, bring him back to New York. Come on.
Oh my goodness.
In New York.
Concrete jungle where dreams are made of.
We had to do it.
We had to.
Before the season officially ends, we had to do a little bit more singing for everybody. All right. We're going to talk Jrue Holiday and Anthony Simons coming up after the break.